season of Lunch and Learn and just with the community, I felt was so important to look at grief and hope, and so much that what we're going through, this is what I know, this is what I do. I'm a licensed clinical social worker. Currently, right now, I'm doing research for my PhD, and I am actually interviewing and talking to families that have lost someone to suicide. So suicide bereavement, sudden loss bereavement. For the past few years, I've worked with families and people that have lost someone to suicide, very sadly and very sudden. And so that work is the work I do. I also, like Aisha said, during the daytime and full time here, I do clinical coordination. I work with MST community and with the therapists providing services there, making sure that we are paying them for the service they provided, mental health services. So we're doing a grant that covers those mental health sessions for the families and the first responder that bravely went in, and working with that directly. So I am not a stranger to trauma and to loss and to grief and hope. And these are very difficult times. So I created this PowerPoint, this presentation. Like Aisha said, I want to do it in a way that would be very interactive. I want you to interrupt anytime during this chat. I want you to talk. And we're gonna walk through the PowerPoint. And it's just a guide of what to expect on grief. And that's it. Are we ready, Aisha? Let me share the PowerPoint here. Okay. Can you guys see that? Okay.
Yes, we can see it.
Okay. I can't really see it, but I see it now. Okay, perfect. So the topic today will be grief and hope. And it's really, I wanted to give you some practical tips for coping with grief during this pandemic. And I want to do more of a mind, body, soul approach. So the idea of mind, body, soul, and spirit, I think it's important when we're talking about grief, especially during this time, that we include the body, the physical. And we also include the spirit part, the spiritual part, and not only the mind and what we're feeling, what we're thinking, but also our body. Some of us are so tired. Some of us are wearing masks. We are working extra hours. We're working full time from home, caring for our kids, caring for our family while trying to survive a pandemic. And at the same time, for some of you watching and listening to my voice right now, some of you have lost someone. So on top of all that, you have grief to deal with. So I want to be sensitive. I want to say that I know that some of you watching and listening to me have lost someone recently during this pandemic. At the end of this presentation, we're going to have a moment of silence for you to be able and us to honor your loved ones and to pause for a moment and remember them and acknowledge that we have lost loved ones. So we've been in a journey since March, and for some of us, it's been a really rocky journey. So this presentation, I'll try to keep it a little bit light and simple. I want you to give feedback. Here we go. Let me go to next. Okay, we got it. Okay, so like I said, we're all dealing with collective loss right now of the world that we knew. The world we knew before March, before the pandemic, is gone forever. So many things have been lost. We have lost so much, and I want to acknowledge that. This presentation is about grief, whether it would be the grief that you lost a job, that you lost something, you lost physical, could be a house, could be a position, could be a person, could be a status, could be a freedom. You lost your freedom as a parent, as a mother. You have much freedom now. You lost your space. I don't want to minimize any loss. Every loss is a loss that needs to be acknowledged, and it's worth to you. It has a value to you. So let's keep that in mind as we go. I'll remind you that this presentation is for people going to grief, whatever that is for you. I wanted to open a question. This is where Aisha and I will work together, and you guys, I wanted you to participate. I don't want it to be only a lecture. So I want to see people type in the chat, and Aisha, you just call out as you, what type of losses are people experiencing now? What are you longing for? What are you missing in your life during this time? And again, it could be a small, could be a large. What are you experiencing now? What type of losses have you experienced? I want to see people to name it. I know that we have many people in this chat right now, and I want to see all of them, all of you. Just type one word, just tell me something you lose, something you lost, something that you're losing, something you're longing for. Could be having whatever.
People are entering in the chat box, and there's a
Yes.
lot in the chat coming through. I see someone
Okay.
says that they're longing to visit their mom who's in a nursing home. People are saying they're longing for vacation, family gatherings, personal connections, the loss of time with my godson, and missing all of his baby time, which is precious.
Yes.
Spending time with friends, social interactions, and I miss my coworkers. I do too. I didn't realize I would miss them this much, but I do. I sit right next to Rafis at work, and I miss being able to like just turn and ask him 1,000 questions throughout the day. Family and friends, family and friend gatherings, my grandmother's last days, visiting loved ones and the physical interactions with others, the opportunity to travel to Puerto Rico and see my family, socializing with friends and family, loss of access and contact with my family and my extended community. Someone says they're grieving the travel restrictions. Um, oh, someone said they can't visit their father and they didn't get to celebrate the honeymoon with their wife. I hope you get that honeymoon. Travel to see family and friends, hugging my son, downtime despite being at home all day. I think that's a really, really good one. Our work life and our home life are now in the same space and just blend all together. Being able to see people without having to discuss whether they are mass distancing, compliance, and varying opinions. My child got married, blessed, but I missed the family that could not attend. Oh, I'm sorry. And then there's some more in someone said seeing their families and their friends in the Q&A box.
Yeah, so I want you to continue to type those in, just so because when you do that, you are everyone else that could see that there's many losses. So when we speak of losses and we make them known, then we become a witness to that loss. And so people that are watching and listening to your chat, they feel like, oh, I'm not alone. I'm not the only one that is missing my coworker. I'm not the only one that is missing my time or traveling time, or I'm not the only one that I'm missing this. Missing time with your loved ones. Some of you mentioned elderly people. I, for myself, don't go see my mom as often. I try to stay away because I don't know. We don't know. We have an invisible pandemic. So there's no way for me to know that if I'm infected or not until I have a COVID test. So I always keep safety, keep a distance, and that isolate us, and that keeps us isolated. So I want to do that so you can see. So look at the chat, continue to type in the chat what losses you're experiencing, and just know that you're not alone in your loss. We are experiencing so much loss
Someone agrees
during
with
this time.
you that
Yes.
um, they're missing visiting their elderly loved ones, like you said about your mom. And somebody said that she lost herself. I used to be drama free, and now I feel I'm so complicated when it comes to going out and more. And someone said, and I thank you so much for sharing, everybody. Someone shared that they actually lost their dear brother who died from the virus.
Yes. And that's a big one. And all of them are big. So losing a family member during this time while you're trying to deal with a pandemic, and now we're going into an election, and we're going to deal with that as well. And you mentioned something important, Aisha, that they say in the chat. They lose They don't want the drama. They don't want the worry. So we also lose the safety. So I used to be able to walk. I live down in Miami Beach. I was able to walk down A1A and by the beach and go to the seashore and freely walk. I don't do that anymore because I don't know who's around me and who's infected, who's not infected. So that's taken away from me. I can't walk that way because I don't know who could infect me. So I've lost, yes, for me, that loss of sense of freedom to be able to walk and be free. So now I walk in a different area, and we were scared. And I don't know how many of you, when you are now walking, you cross the sidewalk when you see someone else. I go to the other side of the sidewalk. And this is what we lose. We lose the connection to people. If someone try to chat with me at the supermarket, I'm like, keep it short, keep a distance, keep moving, get what the grocery, get out. So yes, so let's move forward with the presentation. Thank you so much for that. And let's go to the next one. Let me see here. Okay, so how do we experience grief? I think we experience grief in many different ways. You could type in the chat. I know that some people already, we talk about what you lost. I want to see how you experiencing grief. And again, I want to make interactive because the idea is that I want to normalize it. Big word for some people, not so big for some of the therapists and clinicians watching right now. Normalize it. The fact that I want to know, how do you experience it? Some people have insomnia, they can't sleep. Some people can't get out of bed. Some people can, how are you experiencing grief? Are you eating too much? Are you eating too little? Are you turning yourself where you're numb to emotions, so you no longer feel any emotions now? How are people experiencing grief? If you could just type a few of those there, I would like to see. I want Aisha to read some of those. I want people to know that it's okay, whatever you're feeling, but I want to know that how other people are coping. Could be bad. Maybe you're drinking too much. Maybe you now run out of your bar drinking cabinet.
So I see some answers coming in, and I'm definitely stress eating. I know that. I stress eat and I'm stress eating junk food. I see some other answers coming in. Someone said they're having lack of sleep and anxiety. Someone says, I lose my appetite and have trouble staying asleep. There's mood swings, no appetite, loss of tolerance. That's a really big one. That goes along with the mood swings, just finding yourself snapping really easily over, things that probably didn't anger you as much before. Anxiety. Someone said, I'm sad most of the time. Anxiety and isolation, anxious, worried, and lack of self care. Oh, that lack of self care is a really big one. Watching way too much Netflix. Wait, that's a problem? Probably need to check myself on that. And not sleeping well, irritability, loss of appetite, not able to concentrate and withdrawn, disillusioned about what the world is truly coming to. That's a very deep one. That's a very, very deep one. So I see a few people are um, trouble focusing, which is hard, especially, in these circumstances. And guilt, feeling guilty, and guilty over different things, guilty from like all aspects of what we're dealing with. Guilty if I go out and try to socialize because now I'm worried about what will happen, but then guilty when I refuse people because there's some people who think, oh, you're being too extreme. You don't need to stay locked up in the house all the time. And so I'm guilty that I'm socially isolated, but I'm guilty when I do try to socialize. And so the guilt hits us from all aspects. Um, Medical, social services, and mental health professionals are dealing with having to care for themselves and continue to care for clients and patients who still need us, and practicing our knowledge on ourselves. Yes. I think the frontline workers are having a hard time throughout all of this because they have to serve. Um, my grief is a constant companion, someone says, and I am tempted to make grief a normal part of my life and not the major part of my life. That's a really good statement, and I think Rafis gets a little bit into that as we go through the presentation today. But thank you guys so much for sharing. These are some good shares and some really deep and introspective comments.
Thank you, Aisha. And so, yeah. So here's something I got, and I see you'll never understand until it happens to you. So this idea that your grief is so unique, and whatever you're experiencing, the way you lost your family member, the way it happened, the way you got the news, the way it's just so unique to you. And some of you mentioned personal ways that you've lost your freedom or you lost certain things. It's just unique to you. And so one thing that people complain sometimes when going to grief is that you don't really get it. So one thing that we could do really good for people as friends and as a therapist is never to tell someone, I understand what you're going through, because you don't understand what someone else is going through. And even if you understand a little bit, you're not in their shoes. You're not in the desperation there are. Especially with COVID and pandemic, just to say, oh, I'm home. For some people, being home is not the best thing. They don't want to be home. They really hate being home. And we are not here to judge that. For some people, this is a really bad time to be home. So we need to be sensitive when someone says, oh, I'm home. And you might feel good to be home. Some people don't feel good just being home. Next one is, what is your grief story? So when you began to say, some of you mentioned some of your story and some of your grief story. For me, I lost my dad to suicide. So my dad killed himself, took his life, passed away by suicide at a young age. And so that's my grief story. That's how I entered the world of grief. And us that lost someone in a tragic way, or now like Kobe suddenly, and we don't get to say goodbye, or it's too soon, too much, we enter this grief club that we never really wanted a membership in, but we are part of that grief club. So I understand, and I want to be sensitive to people that might have lost someone to suicide or another type of tragic loss as well. All losses are painful. So mine is no worse, yours is no worse. Just because my dad died by suicide and you died of COVID doesn't mean that mine is more tragic or worse. Pain is pain. When we grieve, it's because we love that person. I love my dad. You love the person you lost. Could be your partner, could be your brother. So let's understand that every grief, every loss needs to be acknowledged, and we cannot compare grief. Moving on to the next one. Again, I talked about that we do a mind-body experience. So throughout the presentation, I'm going to remind you to look at the mind, of the spirit, how we're experiencing. And that's, it was a good thing when Aisha and everyone doing the comments there in the chat was talking about different losses. And you can see how people experience loss in a very different way. And some of those were symptoms and things that you're doing that maybe you haven't done before. Again, I'm coming to you from my house and you might hear some noise because they're working in the building. So that's another thing, the loss of my silence here at home. So we are all dealing with this. So how we enter and experience grief, the typical, if you went to school, you've studied grief in the past, not the last 10 years, but in the past, people really always thought that grief was only experienced, limited only to 5 stages. But no, that's not the case, because there's more to grief than 5 stages. If we want to talk about stages of grief, we're going to go over those, but think of this as major emotions that we feel. Based on Kubler-Ross, who were studying people that were dying. So people were in hospital, and she began to work in hospice with them, and people that were from hospital to hospice, and she was working with the dying. And she realized that when people were getting ready to die, they experienced this. Then they continued to do more research, and David Kessler, which we're going to spend a great deal on his work, after Kubler-Ross, that created the stages, passed away, he was working with her and he continued to work. And one thing that he got is a 6th stage. There's a number 6 stage, and we'll go over that. So this is reviewing what we know about grief. We're going to go into more advanced grief. So if you're a therapist, you're a clinician, and you were trained more than 15 years ago, 10 years ago, you only know these 5 stages. Know that there's a 6th stage, and that's the more advanced, and that's the more integrated. And we're going to go over that stage as well. Any questions so far, Aisha? Okay, we're moving to the next grief. Here we go. So remind that these stages are emotional response, and this is a big part in the mind. The mind, how we're thinking of this, but also connects to the body and our spirit. But in our mind, we have the shock. Our brain can't take it. We have the shock and denial. And I want you to think of this a different roller coaster, not stages in a linear way. And that was the problem with those stages, that it thinks like, oh, if I get to stage 1 and I get stage 2 and stage 3, then I get to stage 5 and I'm done with grief. I arrive at acceptance. And what this has done in many ways, it has caused pain to people that are grieving, because many people listen to this on TV, or you watch a YouTube video about the 5 stages, and you force your family member or your loved one to say, you should be in acceptance now. You got to accept it, that it's gone, and move on. So we push people too quick, too soon to be in one of these stages. I want you to understand that these stages come and go. They're not really stages. They're major emotional, our brain, our body, our soul going through. So the first one, we'll go over through this, but I want you to see here how it goes into like a roller coaster. Could be up and down, up, down, up. So one of the metaphor that we use with our work, clinicians and people that work with grief, is the idea of like an ocean. So ocean waves that come and go. And so think of grief in that way. There are days when the sea is very choppy and you think you're not going to survive the next minute or the next hour. And there are days where you're a little more calm, or hour to hour. Same idea here. So let's move on to the first stage. And I'm going to review the stages of grief now. First one is denial. And this denial it just helps us to survive. It's just so much going on with us that it just helps us to cope. It's kind of a shock, helps with the shock of the news. We try to find a way to simply just get through the day. So denial is good. Sometimes people want to push too quick, too soon out of denial. Sometimes people, you tell them the news, or maybe remember when you experienced your own grief, you heard the news, and then you went through this, and it might have been hard. And some people need that denial for a little bit to get through doing whatever, like kind of autopilot. The next one that we're gonna stay a little bit here is the next one is anger. And anger is a big one, because anger is in many ways it's necessary to have this anger, to experience anger. The more truly you feel it, you need to experience your anger. You might be angry that this happened. You might be angry at the politicians. You might be angry at what's happening. You might be angry at what's going on. So many things that you might be angry with. And angry is an important emotion to feel. So I want you to understand that there are many emotions on the anger. And sometimes we don't see that anger. We might not realize that we just been angry and we experience another emotion. But anger is an important one. And then we'll get to it when we come to self-help and we'll talk more about anger. But let's go to the next one. So the metaphor of anger is this, it's like being lost at a sea, and when you have this grief, like I said, it's like being in a sea, or it's just this whole sea, being lost at a sea. And when you have this anger, one of the things that Kessler talked about is that when you're in that anger or you're in that loss, you have no connection to anything. And then you get angry at someone or something. You get angry at the doctor for maybe not doing the right thing, or you get angry at the paramedics for not being there. And then once you get angry, then he says that you now have someone to be angry at. And so you connect somehow and you create a structure. So sometimes the anger helps you. And so it's okay to feel the anger. And if you cannot get past your anger, then this is a good time to do the therapy. Some people do exercise. You have to experience the anger and you have to let go of the anger, dissipate it. It's an energy, it needs to be. Sorry for the noise, I'm not sure if you can hear that. So the next one is going to be bargaining. And in this stage right here, this is when people start to bargain. If you believe in God and people begin with a higher self, you might say, please God, you start bargaining. If I just get through this pain, or if you could just bring my loved one back, I promise that I will do this. You can make a truce, or you might say, if I get through this anger, whatever it is that you're experiencing, that anger combines with bargaining, then you start trying to create a truce or create some kind of bargain. That's what it comes down to it. Aisha, do we have any comments?
No questions right now. Someone did ask if they could get the slides after this. Yes, please feel free to email me after the training. I will be able to give you a copy of the slides. I'll give you that information at the end. And someone says, you're okay. You don't have to apologize for the noise. We all have to deal with something like this. It's part of just remote working. So people are pretty understanding that this is just what happens from our work from home situation.
Thank you. If it becomes too much, you take my next slide and go over Aisha. So this bargaining is important, because that's when we begin to try with the bargaining. We try to do, what can we're trying to find ways that we can control it. That we say, if you do this, or if you do that, that's part of the bargaining. We do not enter a living stage in linear fashion. I talked about that before. We may feel one and then feel the other. So this bargaining is one that I think that was very specific to when people were dying, and when you have a loved ones and they're dying. Right now, some of you might have someone in the hospital, someone in the ICU, or right now some of you are sick and you're saying, bargaining with God, if I get better, I wear a mask every day. If I get better, I will donate this. Or if my loved ones survive, then I'll get better. So whatever it is a bargaining, is part of the how we cope with grief. Next one that we have here is depression. And after bargaining, and after we tried all the bargaining, or find our way and try to avoid it or bargain, then we move into a completely depression. And this basically what happens is that we have tried everything. We couldn't bargain our way out of it. We can find a way to, it's not going away. We already talked to God. We already did all the deals. And now we're in this deep depression. And we're in this deep depression, and we're going into a place where we really don't see any light. But it's important to understand that this depression is not a clinical depression. It's part of the grief. Depression in this sense is part of the grief. To feel like you don't want to get out of bed, you don't want to see it next day, you really are down and blue and have no hope. You have empty feelings. That's it. You succumb to it. It's too much. Crumble has come to an end, as you know it. And that's at that time when you need the most support and the most people around you and near you. So another thing about depression is that we withdraw from life. We might not want to talk to no one. We might be in this kind of fog where we don't think. This is the part of the brain, our brain, we can't think. We're so depressed we can't even concentrate. Maybe you are trying to work through your loss and trying to work through your stage of depression, but you can't even read. You read an email 3 times and that doesn't make sense. You can't get past that one line. You can't get out of bed. It's hard for you to even cook for yourself. That's when we need help from other people and say, I can't cook. I haven't eaten in 2 days. I haven't taken a shower. Can you just help me? Can you bring me some food? And if you don't have that, then it's okay to reach out for help and ask yourself, What do you need at this time? What is creating the depression? What is about depressing about the situation? But know that it's normal and it's completely appropriate response to feel this way. So Aisha, any questions or anything about the stages so far? We went through the anger
Somebody
stage.
was asking if you could possibly just go back to bargaining real quick. I
Okay.
think they just wanted a little bit more clarification on bargaining, if you could do that.
Yeah. Maybe they have a specific question about it. I think of bargaining as making a deal. I want to make a deal with God or with life. I wanted my way to, I don't want to say con my way out of it. But, you know, it's like if you, maybe you get stopped by the police. You want to bargain with them. It's like, can you give me a warning? Don't give me a ticket really. Because, you know, maybe you want to bargain your way out of the pain. You're trying to find a way out. And so people make deal. If you're having a hard time getting this one, was one of the stages that really was coming from people that were dying. And when people are dying, or you have someone dying in the hospital right now, you want to bargain with God. You say, God, if I could just get 5 more minutes with my loved ones, if I could just go back to the last hour when I saw them, before this freaking virus came. Can we go back to 2018? Can we go back to 2019? And I could just spend one more day with them. I would like to have one more conversation. If they're dying right now, I'm sorry. So you might find yourself where you're like, if they could get better, I promise that I will stop this, I'll stop that. You're bargaining your way out of grief or out of the loss. That's what they're doing. They're trying to exchange. I give you this if you take away the pain, if you take away the bargain. That makes sense.
Really helpful. Yes, that was really, really helpful, Rafis. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. And we'll come back to it. So depression is a big one. Depression is what I already went over, but I want to do one more point. This is where people think they think of grief as depression, sadness, all black, all depressed, life is gone. And people think, my God, they're so sad because they're going through grief. The problem is that sometimes people are not here yet. And we see people that have lost someone and they're not depressed. And you're like, well, they really didn't love them because they're not depressed. I thought they were going to be more depressed. Or culturally, talk about culture. Some culture expect you to be in this depression for a long time. No, I don't want to eat. No, I don't want anything. I'm dressed all in black. My life is gone, depressed, horrible. And people culturally expect you to stay in depression. And I want to tell you, it's okay not to be there. If you don't feel depressed, and if you feel depression for a little bit, and now you feel a different emotion, do what you feel you need to do. Do not let culture or society or norms makes you feel guilty. Some people feel guilty because they don't feel depressed. Your tears might have not arrived. Sometimes people say, I cannot cry. I run support group for people that have lost someone to suicide. And sometimes they come to the group and they say, I haven't cried a tear yet. I don't have any tear. It's okay. If you have no tear, it's fine. If you have tears, it's fine. The next one is acceptance. And this was the big one. If you were trained as a therapist, a clinician, a coach, or helper, you were trained that acceptance is the nirvana, is what we need to arrive to. This is what has caused so much pain to people, that people want to push you to this. You just got to accept it. You just got to accept it. Like accepting it will make it better. Acceptance doesn't make it better. But it's all understand that it's good to understand that this happened. Acceptance helps you to understand that. Aisha, I am going to mute this for a minute. Aisha, are you there?
Yes, I'm most definitely
Okay, so
here. You want
good. Then no way. So acceptance I was going to say if you could read it because of the noise, but if it gets too much, you can read it.
I can read it for you. Just let
You
me know
read it.
when.
I'm going to mute myself for a minute.
Okay. So acceptance is often confused with the notion of being all right or okay with what has happened, but that's not really the case. I was speaking with a few people in the chat box just about, the grief that they've experienced from the loss of a family member. And, it's not that you ever feel okay or that you get over the loss of your loved one, but more so that you're accepting that your loved one is gone and that you'll never be able to pick up the phone again and speak with them. You'll never be able to visit them. You don't necessarily like the fact that they're gone. You won't ever really get over the fact that they're gone. But Rafis used a really good analogy earlier, of grief being like the waves of the ocean. It comes and it goes. And there's some days when you're in full acceptance and you feel okay with what has happened. And you feel as if you've come to that resolve of, this is my new reality now. But there are also some days that are really, really hard and difficult to get through. I liken it to just, um, for an example that we can all really identify with right now, this pandemic that we're currently going through. There's some days when I'm glad that I'm working from home and I can wear my pajama bottoms or sweatpants while doing all type of activities for work. And then there's some days when it hits you hard because of that uncertainty and that loss of the regular connections that we are used to having that we don't necessarily have now. And so acceptance is us recognizing that we now live in this world where, this loved one or our old circumstances are missing, and understanding that we have to maintain life, we have to function, we have to keep going nonetheless because we can't hold on to the past. But it's still us recognizing that our lives have been changed and that we do have to readjust and reorganize and reassign ourselves and our roles in our family because we may not have that individual or we may not have our past circumstances around anymore to hold on to. And so acceptance is, coming to the realization that sometimes there may be more good days than bad days, but there's gonna be bad days too. And just learning to function. I think a lot of the times people think that in getting to acceptance and in starting to enjoy life again, we're betraying the memories of our loved ones. But we're never really going to replace that person. We're never going to replace that loss. We may be able to move on in different ways and make new connections and build new relationships. But it's important that we don't deny our feelings and we don't deny the hardship that comes out of those bad days. We're listening to the needs, we're listening to what our emotions are from day to day to day, and we're reaching out to other people and becoming involved in lives again and building those interpersonal relationships, those friendships, building the skills that we need to continue getting through our grief. Did I do good, Rafis? You're on mute.
my mic. Thank you so much. So the next one, and this is where the research has gone, is finding meaning. Is this stage that after we get to acceptance, what was happening when they were doing research, that's that people stay there, and nothing happens if you stay in acceptance. Okay, I accepted the loss, but what's next? So what really started doing research, and David Kessler here, the author of the book, Finding Meaning, the sixth stage, and also has a good website called grief.com, is that once you get to acceptance and you realize it happened, this is the one that was very painful. So if we could take a deep breath for a moment, we accept now that we are in the middle of a pandemic. And that's a hard thing to understand. We are in a pandemic that we have not seen since 1918 or, way back into the Black Plague. We are in a pandemic, and that's hard to understand. Same thing is once we understand the loss and realize we have lost our loved one, then grief is an extremely challenging thing. But we find meaning not in this meaning has to do with how do we make meaning, not with the death, but how do we make meaning how we, with the loss, with what we experiencing, how do we heal our pain and our loved ones? So the meaning is coming not from saying, oh, the loss was meant to be. Oh, I'm so happy that the loss. No, I'm not saying that. I would never be happy that my dad died by suicide, but I could find meaning in that experience of that loss and purpose. So the next one is about that, how that meaning connects us to the why or why me question, which I speak to survival guilt a lot. And I want to, can you read this one, Aisha? I'll go back to it. It's a quote. I'm going to read it to you here. Now the noise calmed down a little bit. So this one is a quote that I really want to read to you. And this one says, when we don't have a why, we tend to jump and play God. So we tell ourselves, you know, I could have prevented his death, her death, or it should have not been that way. You know, that means that we are becoming like God, that we know when someone should or died or decides to die. Just like the Hamilton played, you know, who gets, one of the songs says, who get to decide who lives and who dies. We don't have that choice. I can't tell you why 200 and something people have died and me and you are still here. And that speaks to survival guilt. Why did they want to only out of everyone in your family, you're the only survivor one, or maybe the one in your building, the one in your company, you know, you haven't got the virus, or maybe out of everyone, you survive. And maybe when you look around, you have resources and you have things that other people don't have. And you feel guilty for that, or you feel guilty for being alive, or for not getting COVID. You know, so many people have gotten it, but you haven't gotten it. So this is important to know that we can play God. We don't know why things happen. And that's where we start creating meaning and we get engaged in what is called meaning making. We start making meaning of this. And that's why this is so powerful. And I recommend to everyone that really wants to work with grief, understand grief, I recommend this book, Finding Meaning. This is where it comes from. And we're going to talk more about it, but it's really, really good. So the next one, let me go there. So when we don't have a why, we tend to jump in and play God. I already said that. We said that already. So here's a question to reflect. So this is a good time to take a pause and think about the why. And if you're struggling with why and finding meaning, how can you think of this question for yourself? How can you honor your loved ones? How can you create a different life that includes them? Just because they're gone and this horrible thing happened, how can we bring them into our life? How can you use your experience to help others? I say some people might not be there. I want to warn people and that you might not be there yet. But at one point in your grief, like I have, and many people that have overcome grief, we get to a point where we find a reason or purpose in the loss. So right now I work people that have died, the family member that have someone that died by suicide. I am doing research in suicide. I became a therapist because of my experience with my dad. And so how can you honor your loved ones? What can you do that includes them or their memory? Aisha, I'll give it to you now. I see the chat.
So someone said that my brother passed in 2000 at 45 years old, and my meaning and comfort comes from his children and grandchildren. Tell myself he lives on through them and we talk about him. This took some time to come to this, but still miss him daily. That Thank you so much, Patty, for sharing that. I think that is a true illustration of how you have been able to continue to honor him through his offspring and through his loved ones, and also, you know, just making sure that his memory stays alive and by talking about him. I think a lot of times in our grief we feel as if we mention the person or talk about the person, that's going to make our grief stronger. But I always I'm obsessed. Rafis knows, and some of my coworkers knows that I'm obsessed with the movie Coco. It's one of my favorite all-time movies in the world, because one of the biggest and most important morals that that movie really just focuses on is to honor the people who have passed, to honor our ancestors and our loved ones by continuing to keep their memories alive by just talking about them. Because how else are we going to, make sure that other people understand how much we love them? Um, somebody's else is sharing just about how they've been feeling throughout this pandemic. They say that some days I get mad with the president or with 2020 or with the weather because it's hot. The key is get mad with something or somebody. I think sometimes we shy away from anger because we think of anger as a such a negative emotion, and we think that there's something wrong with being angry. Um, but I used to teach anger management classes, and I told somebody, I was like, our bodies are made to feel all these emotions. We're made to feel happy. We're made to feel sad. We're made to feel that anger. And so it's what you do with that anger that is negative or positive, but not the anger itself. And I definitely sometimes shake my fist at the sun. I'm like, why is Florida so hot? And then, of course, on rainy days, I'm like, oh, I just wish I could see the sun. Where's the sun? I just wish. Um, and so I think it's just how we're approaching those emotions that we're feeling, and how what we're doing, what actions are we taking to make sure that we're expelling those emotions and we're not holding on to them. But also, if anybody else wants to answer any of the reflection questions, how do you honor your loved ones, and how do you use your experiences that you've gone through to help other people? If you want to drop it in the chat box so that we can reflect on some of the why. But thank you both for sharing those experiences with us. Okay.
You hear me, Aisha?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Okay. This will help with the noise and you hear me better, hopefully. So yeah, thank you, Aisha, for doing that. So we're going to continue. You were saying something?
No. Oh, there.
Okay.
Somebody else wrote in the chat box that there's certain songs that I associate with my father, and when they come on, I turn it up and I think of him as I sing my heart out. Uh-huh. I'd love to know what songs those are. And someone said that they created a scholarship fund to honor their loved ones. That's
And
really
that's what
incredible.
and that is a beautiful example of how finding meaning or creating meaning about your loved ones. Aisha, you were talking about the movie Coco, and it's about continuing bonds. So now one of the other things that is being done in the field of grief and loss is this research. How can we continue the bond with the loved ones? How can we honor them? So there, you are very aware of Mother Against Drunk Driving. So, this mom, lost a child. And so what can I do? So this won't happen to other parent. And she found meaning. That's what happens. Found meaning of purpose by creating this organization, which has saved so many lives. So it's finding meaning in the experience of the loss. It's not saying, people sometimes feel that I'm referring to, or that David Kessler, or people that talk about the sixth stage is saying, oh, it was meant that he died. And it was a good thing. It was never a good thing. It will never be a good thing. It will never be a freaking good thing that we're in the middle of a pandemic. It will never be a good thing. It's not a good thing that I'm trying to do a presentation and I cannot hear anything with this noise. So many things that you're experiencing right now is not good. That's where the anger comes in. That's what you're experiencing. But once you experience this, what can I do? How can I create a different life that now includes that? This new normal, how can I live my life in a way that I don't forget them? For some of you that have lost partner, you lost your wife or your spouse, how can I remarry and still include that person in my life, in my new life? If you lost a child, how can I have another kid and still include my child that I lost? I don't want to pretend that I'm replacing them. If I lost a pet, how can I get a new pet and still include that old pet that I had in my new life? How can I honor them? How can I find meaning and purpose? That's what we're referring to. And many people also sometimes do donation, and they'll create like a scholarship, like you said, or there's many things that people could do because of a loss. Doesn't mean that the loss was justified.
So
Any
someone,
other?
yeah, there's a few other ones coming in. Someone shared the songs she likes to sing to honor her dad. Apparently, they're Rob Zombie songs. Someone says, I think keeping memories alive and talking about their loved ones that have been lost by whatever means, helping others to discuss their feelings. I have that in both my family and friends, and it makes a good impact to talk to them. And someone says, I honor my loved ones by not forgetting them. And Lily commented that my mom used to make soup on rainy days. Now I make soup when it rains, and we have had soup a lot these past days. Definitely a week filled with soup, probably. But that's a good way to honor our loved ones. Sharing some of the activities that they enjoyed, or eating the foods that they enjoyed, or just preparing something that that they did with love for you. And sometimes you can just feel them while you're completing that activity because you know that they're still with you in some form.
Yeah, that is a beautiful way. And when I work with parents that have lost a child to suicide, and suddenly many of them wear their favorite color when it's their anniversary or their birthday. They used to love going to Italian restaurants. So on that day, every year that we celebrate his anniversary or his birthday, we go to Italian restaurant, his favorite Italian restaurant. We prepare his favorite meal. He liked the color green, so we wear green on that day. Yes, you're right. For me, my father liked to help other people. And so when I help other people, I am bringing my dad into my life by being like him. So many things, yes.
Someone says that I complete random acts of kindness in honor of my daughter. And
Oh,
that's really sweet. I really like that one. Paul says, for me, honoring the ones I lost throughout the course of my life means having me try to live my best life because that is what they wanted me to do. When I was in a relationship with them before their passing, they wanted so many good things for me, and how can I not honor that? Now my best life is not just personal, it is communal. And that is a good way. It's continuing. They would want you to be happy. A lot of the times that's what I've told other people and past clients that I've worked with is your loved ones would want you to keep living your life and they would want you to be happy. So how can you not honor them by living that best life and sharing that with other people as well? Thank you
you
so
could,
much.
go ahead.
No, that's it. There's no other comments right now.
Okay, good. So, and one more thing also that people talk about, many parents talk about in the groups and people that have lost someone, and is to remember their name, to mention their names. When people ask you how many kids you have, you still have that same amount of kids. They're just, one of them is not here now, passed away, but you're still a mother. Even if you have, that was your single child, you're still a mother. You're still a mother to your son name and the name of your son. They just passed away. So Aisha, I want to talk also about finding meaning a little bit deeper, because we also doing CEUs and there are clinicians here as well, and many people want to know more. So another way to look at this finding meaning is using psychologist Martin Seligman application to this stage of David Kessler. And it's this 3P that I'm going to go over. And people might be familiar with this if they do coaching or life, but there's 3P that we can see how this applied, and also how can we find meaning. The first one is personalization. And this one right here this is the one where we feel that we take it personal. This is what we blame ourselves. We feel like this only happened to me, or this happened because of me. They die because of me, because there's something I didn't do on time. There's something that I should have done, or I did, only if I would have gotten there before. This loss happened to me because of me. And so you personalize it, you make it, you blame yourself. So you have to be very careful with blaming yourself and feeling that you caused this. Again, mind, body, spirit. Can you really control when someone goes and someone stays. Even if they die, like my dad, by suicide or by tragic loss, do you really have that much control? So how much control you have? And this is a big thing that people struggle with, this me feeling guilty, or why me? The next P that we have is pervasiveness. This idea that is pervasive, that is all over, that, you know, that the belief that a negative will destroy everything, that your life is now destroyed, that everything is destroyed. This loss took away everything. Another one to minimize the loss, but it feels sometimes like I have no reason to live. Everything has died when my loved one died. In some way it feels that way, the mind and your heart, but there's so many more things still happening in life. The world's still turning, and it's hard to understand, but we cannot do this thing. So these things that we're talking about here, personalizing it, taking it personal and saying it was my fault, it was because of me, it will not help. We need to go beyond and find the meaning. And then personalization, pervasiveness, we cannot generalize to everything. The next P that we have here is permanence. And this permanence, it refers to this Buddhist idea, or those people that do mindfulness, or permanence refers to being permanent. That they believe that the effect of a loss or disaster, that the pandemic, this pandemic will last forever. How many of you, if you could raise your hand or say something, feel like this pandemic is never going to end? This freaking thing is never going to end. We thought it was going to be over in the summer. We were going to somehow put it together. It's never going to end. And it's draining and it's tired. And we wake up every morning and we're still in the middle of a pandemic. We wake up and we're still experiencing the loss. You that have lost a loved one, a spouse, a lover, significant other, you wake up to an empty bed. They're not there. And you go to sleep hoping that they'll just on a trip and they'll come back, but they're not there. This idea of permanent, but and also what we do is that we equate that permanent, that they're not here, that the pain also will be permanent. We think that the pain is going to be forever, but the pain will not last forever. We will learn to live with the pain. It will lessen the pain. And when we find meaning, or we find how to make sense of the loss, our pain will fade, will not go away, which takes me to the next one. You want to read this one? Okay, you want to read this one, Aisha? I'll read it for you. So the reality is that your grief, that you will grieve forever. You will not get over the loss of a loved one. You will learn to live with it. You will heal, and you will rebuild yourself around the loss you have suffered. You will be whole again, but you will never, I will put that again, you will never, never be the same. Nor should you be the same, nor you want to. We will never, never, never be the same after this pandemic. Our life will never be the same. I don't know one person, maybe someone in the chat say my life will be the same. I don't know that life will be the same. We have experienced so much pain, so much loss. Our life has changed, the way we live. And it's not all for bad. I mean, the finding meaning is that we might now appreciate life more. We will appreciate more when we're able to come back together and break bread together and do things with friends. We will cherish that more. That's another way of finding meaning. One meaning that I will get out of this pandemic is that my travel, I will enjoy every place I go more. I love traveling. Every time I go to a place now and I'm having a meal at that place and I'm enjoying people, I will cherish the moment. I will complain less. I will make a point that on Friday and on weekends, I spend time with my family and friends, that I will be able to enjoy and talk to strangers once the pandemic is over. So when we lose someone suddenly, or we lose someone, grief learns us to appreciate people in our life. We become more tender to people. So that's another way. So this meaning is creating meaning, is learning about grief, is finding lessons in the grief, in that loss. Again, it's not saying that it was meant to be or that the loss was meant to be. Any questions there, Aisha?
No questions, but just other people talking about how they continue to honor people. Um, Susan says that she creates community projects in remembrance of her grandparents who were leaders in our community every year. And they do a back to school drive in Jamaica where they give away school supplies and clothing to kids and parents. And currently they've served over 3,000 kids and continuing to grow each year.
That's beautiful.
That's very, very admirable.
So we have gone over the stages of grief. So there are 6 stages. Major emotions that we feel. I want to remember that it's like a roller coaster. We could feel this emotion, but it's good to understand where they're at. But do not push yourself or push anyone to go to another stage or be in another stage. Do not label people. Don't say, oh, right now you're in the acceptance stage. That's why you're feeling better. Because people sometimes get upset. I feel like we're minimizing their pain. It's just good to understand that what you're feeling is a stage or something that will pass, but that it's important to go through it. I always think of grief as a forest that we must walk through it. We cannot avoid it. We have to walk through this forest to get to the other side. So I always tell my client when I'm working with them, you must go through the pain of the grief. When are you ready? You might need help, but we must face the grief. So Aisha, what we have left is to do self-care and talk about self-care and hope. So we covered today so far, we have covered the definition of grief, what it's like, how the symptoms of grief. We've used the metaphor and we thought about the pandemic in a way to bring it home. And people talk about who they have lost, how they honor their loved one. Now I want to move to self-care. How do we care for ourselves during a pandemic, during grief, during a pandemic and grief, if you're going through both, during the loss of a job, loss of a friend, loss of a family member, of a brother, of a sibling, the loss of certainty. We don't know what's going to happen now. The loss of whatever you have lost. How do we freaking cope with that? How do we do that and stay healthy and are there for other people? The challenge that I find, Aisha, when I'm working with family members, especially parents, is that you have other kids. You might have other kids. So if you lost a kid or lost a brother or a sister, how can you still be a wife to your husband and your wife and your spouse, still care of the other kids when you're still grieving? So how can you work? How can you go back to work while you're grieving? How can you do this? We're gonna go over self-care, some techniques, some tips, and then I want to close with hope and a moment of silence. That's what we have left. I think we're doing good in time. We might actually be able to finish a little bit earlier, but I want to make sure that you now take note, be kind to yourself, and let's explore together. You know, Aisha is going to read some comments, ways that we could take care of ourselves during this. I will share some of the researcher, and the next part I'm going to cover, it comes from this 2 books. I will share at the end. One is called It's Okay That You're Not Okay During Grief. And then the other book, it comes from this book about the unspeakable loss when you lose a spouse. I always like to base my work on evidence-based, on research, on people that other clinicians, other people, and what they have done. So this is, so you'll get not only my experience, because I could tell you how I cope with my loss of my dad, but that's a personal way. I want to bring what are the grief expert are saying. And I recommend you do the same. You just grab the resources that we have, and sometimes psychoeducation helps a lot of people to just say, okay, I am going to read a book. I'm going to learn a little bit more. I'm going to watch this talk. Okay, Aisha, are we ready for self-care? Yes, we go here.
Can you give us the name of the books again?
I will at the end. I have pictures and everything at the end.
Perfect. Somebody is asking, so
Yes, 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 yes. I have pictures of them. I have the author and the PowerPoint will have them. Okay. Self-care during our grief. And this again, David Kessler from that book, Finding Meaning. Every loss has meaning. I've said that before. And all losses are to be grieved and witnessed. Witness means that we stand with someone else by their side. And what does a witness do? A witness see things. If you're a witness, you saw something. So when you're a witness to someone who's grieving, you could say, I see your pain. I am here by your side. And today, what I'm doing for you is witnessing, letting you know that I see your pain. Some of you are going through terrible pain right now, and I don't want to minimize it. And some of you are going through terrible losses right now. And that's why we're doing this. And you're not alone. You're not alone. When you saw the beginning of this chat, many people are experiencing many losses. And every loss has meaning, right? To us. Even if someone else says, well, that's not a big loss. I don't think that's a loss. I wouldn't consider that a loss. Well, that is their opinion. And you could shut them up and say, that is your opinion. Or say, that is, I disagree to, I agree to disagree, but my loss to me is a loss. The fact that I cannot do this or cannot do that, that's a loss. Move forward here. My New York side came off a little bit there. So self-care during it, because what I see, Aisha, is that a lot of people take unnecessary pain from the loved one, because some people trying to be helpful, they inflict more pain than they need to on the loved one, so don't take any pain that you shouldn't have to take. You already have enough. So one thing that you could do is name your loss. We did that at the beginning in the chat when Aisha read some of your losses. I said, what are things that you've lost? What are you missing? Connect to that feeling. We talked about the feelings. Could be the anger, the depression, but there's many feelings besides all those. It's normal to feel a range of emotions. I could feel angry. And by the way, you could be angry at the fact that your loved one took their life away. You could be angry at them for doing that they did. You could be angry that your spouse or your loved one or your sibling or your family member did not protect themselves. You told them, wear a mask, keep a distance, don't go to that party, don't do that, and they did it, and now they're dead. You could be angry at them and at the same time feel so much pain that you miss them. It's okay to have more than one emotions at the same time. You could have 3 emotions. You could have what's called mixed emotion. I could feel angry for what they did and feel so much love and pain for their not being here right now. So whatever you feel it.
I like that you said that, because I think sometimes we forget that there's other emotions that we can feel too. Sometimes you may even feel relieved. I had a loved one on my father's side of family. Everybody who dies from cancer. I don't know any family member who has died from any other natural causes. It's all cancer. And my last grand aunt who died was suffering for 2 years, going through treatment, going through radiation, and nothing helped. And by the time she died, we were actually pretty relieved because we knew she wasn't in pain anymore, and we were glad that she was able to move on, knowing that she had the love of her family. And so feel those emotions. That's perfectly fine. Don't let anybody else police what you're supposed to be feeling through your grief. We had some other comments. Someone said they like the New York side and that no one can tell you your emotions are not valid. I like his New York style too, everybody. It comes out every now and then. And someone said that going through this has allowed me to appreciate the smaller things in life, to find meaning and purpose. It also allows me to teach online anywhere in the world, which I couldn't do before. And currently I'm in Jamaica teaching my students in Florida, and I'm loving it because I get to spend time with my loved ones I haven't seen in a while. And that's you finding the positive in the moment, and that's good. Someone said before that we have to find the positive, remain positive for all we do have during or grieving moments. And so I see Rafis is put some more questions, some reflection questions up on the screen. For self-care during our grief and this time that we find ourselves in, what would you need in order to feel more supported with the pain of your loss? And how can you make the situation more kinder, gentler, and easier on your heart? And if anybody would like to share their comments on these reflections, what could you do to feel more supported? And what can you do to make this situation gentler and easier on yourself and your heart?
Thank you, thank you, Aisha. And as the people are writing and you're writing or thinking about this for yourself, this is about showing yourself kindness. You know, what can you do to feel more kind to yourself, to show kindness and be more gentle with yourself? And we're gonna do another exercise, the last one that we'll do at the end, is to do that. I wanna share another quote here, and this one is same. It's about caring for yourself, showing up with love and tenderness for yourself, for your excruciating pain. It won't fix anything that can be fixed. In other words, we will not be able to fix the past 7 months or however many months we've been in this pandemic. It's not going to fix that. But what can you do? How can you be kind? Especially when you guys have lived through so much. You have to go through the ER. You have to be there for your loved one. You have to plan your funeral. You have to try to Zoom and do your work and live through life and the pandemic. You deserve the utmost care and respect. You need love and attention. You need caring. You need to realize, I've gone through so much. I buried my loved ones. I am working from home. I am trying to survive. I am looking at my saving every day. How am I gonna pay this? I'm gonna pay that. Be kind to yourself. We had never been in this situation before in a pandemic. We all learning together. We all trying to put it together. So be kind. How can you show kindness? That was what the question was, Aisha. You asked the question, what will you need in order to feel more supported with the pain of this loss? How can you yourself make the situation more kind to you, more gentler, easier on your heart? How can you be kinder? Sometimes we're very harsh on ourselves. What have people wrote, Aisha? That people comment on what can they do to
Yes,
make
someone
it
said,
kinder?
so someone says, don't ask how you can help. Ask if you can help with specific activities, such as cooking a meal, picking up groceries, walking the dogs, etc. And she said, well, for her, she says her name and share memories and pictures.
Yes. And you know, Aisha, all this all this come down to, we are talking about kindness, because at the end of the day, kindness is self-care. When we are kind to ourselves, because I use self-care because we have therapists and we have clinicians, but some people don't get what is self-care means. It means like we're selfish, like I'm only thinking about myself. No, it doesn't mean that. It means that you're self-caring. You're caring for yourself. Think, how will you care if someone that you was a friend of yours or your best friend, your, you know, what do I call it, BFF, if your BFF was going through something like this that you're going through right now, living in this country where you are in your situation, what will you say to them? What will you suggest? Because we're really great at taking care of other people. We're really horrible. I, at least myself, I'm horrible at caring for myself. I would spend all day listening to your problem and trying to be like, have you eaten already? Have you taken care of yourself? You want some soup? Meanwhile, I am starving. I haven't eaten anything and I just blame myself. So I need to show kindness to myself if I was caring for someone that I care for. So self-care is self-love, is caring for ourselves. Because if we don't care for ourselves, we're not gonna get through this. That's the whole point. You have other kids, you have other family member, you have a life that needs to move forward and go on. It's gonna be hard. So kindness is recognizing when you need to back off a bit. And it's allowing your pain to exist without judgment. We have to leave this judgment thing aside, that you should be already ahead of your grief, that you should move moving forward, that you're going too slow, that you're going too fast, that you're dancing and singing too much, that you should be more depressed. Take the judgment away. Trust yourself in saying yes to what helps and no to what does not help. Kindness means that not letting your mind beat you up. If it's late night and you need to go to sleep and now it's not time to go back and rehash what happened, how you could have prevented, you say, you know, I haven't slept, I need to sleep. So I'm gonna do whatever I need do a tea, chamomile tea, passion fruit tea, take some melatonin, or take something that your doctor has given you, just relax. But I need 8 hours sleep because tomorrow my grief is going to be waiting for me there. So for now, I just need some sleep. Also, we could be kind and tell people to shut up for a minute. If they're talking too much or they want to go there again, I'm like, can you tell me again what happened? You can say, I don't want to talk about it today. And it's okay to tell them, I don't want to talk about it.
Someone else said that they
Go ahead.
never say that, they never tell people, I'm sorry for your loss. And then someone said, I tell lots of stories about my loved ones who have passed away, especially now. And lately I find myself journaling like my grandmother and gardening like my grandfather to feel close to them. And yeah, definitely doing self-care activities that the person enjoyed is definitely a way to feel close to them and feel connected to that person, because you're sharing memories throughout those moments, and you're sharing things that you knew were positive moments that those people liked. So
Yes, Aisha, can you read this one? An exercise.
wellness versus worseness, some of self-care exercises to do. um, Make a list side by side, two lists actually. What makes you feel saner and what makes you feel crazy? What are your
Yes.
thoughts on the worst side? So kind of like a pro and con for self-care activity. On
Yeah,
the,
we're gonna have two sides in this, or just put in a chat. Mhm.
so on the other side, list wellness thoughts, ideas, images, and that help you feel more rooted and calmer and a bit better and kinder to yourself and more hopeful.
So thank you, Aisha. So what is this is doing is not only to have a list for having the sake of a list. This is a self-care exercise that will help you in the times when you are overwhelmed by grief. What I want you to do, and I want people to throw in the chat, what is some things that make it worse? What is a trigger that make it worse? Maybe driving by the hospital. Maybe they died at a certain hospital. Now every time you had to drive by the hospital, make it worse. What makes it better? What gives a little better? Some of you talk about music. You listen to a song. You eat their chicken soup. Then you feel connected to them. You feel better. You feel nurtured. So let's talk about what makes it worse and what makes it better. Because what's going to happen and what I want you to do, let's go ahead, Aisha.
So there were a few questions. Someone said, I'm not sure why you wouldn't say you're sorry for their loss. If it's true, why not? I think that was just that person's comment that they never say that. But I'm not sure if Rafis, you want to comment on that. Sometimes for me, it may sound just like a very cliche thing to do and doesn't have a lot of meaning and depth. Um, I do say it at times though, because you know what? Sometimes I am sorry that that person has gone through and experienced that loss in their life. Especially if I'm not as familiar with them. But for some individuals, I try to be a little bit more meaningful and say something like, I'm sorry that you're feeling this way. I'm sorry you're going through this. I'm sorry that you have to deal with this. It sounds really hard. And try more so to identify with the emotion that that person is expressing rather than just, a shallow, like, oh, I'm sorry your dad died. Because not everybody, it doesn't necessarily really delve into the depths of what that person goes through. And it comes across as pretty cliche. Um, but it's not wrong to say if you are, and somebody said it's not wrong to say if you're being sincere. And someone asks if they're wrong if they feel like they need an accountability partner. Oh, definitely not. We all need accountability in different parts of our lives. um, I need accountability to maintain my diets, and if I don't have somebody who's checking me and making sure that I'm eating regularly and exercising, well, guess what, I'm just going to binge eat before Netflix all day long. And sometimes that accountability partner is helpful in our grief as well, because that person can be the one who checks in with you to say, hey, you know what? As long as there's open communication and you're receptive to that accountability. But I may need somebody to come and get me out of bed because my depression is worsening and I'm not moving and I haven't been able to function. And that person can help guide me and say, hey, you know what? Let's go for a walk around the park because you need to get outside. You need to get some serotonin in your body. You need to get do something else than what you've been doing so far. But make sure that if you are going to be that accountability person, that you're doing it with sincerity, but you're also doing it with kindness and not forcing the person to move beyond that stage when they're not ready, willing, or able to.
Aisha, thank you. That was really good that you said that, and I thank you for those two questions. And at the end of the day, the answer is the same. You need to do what you need to do for yourself. What will make it better? That's what we're making the list now, or what will make it better? What make it worse? What makes it better? Let's see what people are sharing, Aisha. I want to see some ideas. What images or thoughts or the wellness list? What makes you feel more rooted? Maybe you just feel more rooted, less alone, kinder to yourself, more hopeful. And what does not? What does not? Maybe people making certain comments. Aisha, what are people sharing?
So nobody is writing yet.
Oh,
Actually,
okay.
we're still thinking. But I can for sure share. Um, Something that I know makes me feel worse is when I do isolate myself. As much as I isolate because that's what my depression symptoms call for me to do, I know that sometimes I have to force myself to be social, because if I do try to isolate and I do withdraw from social settings, I know that that's going to just make me sad. And then sometimes I isolate and I ignore phone calls, and then I get angry and upset that nobody is calling me. I'm like, oh my goodness, I can't believe they're not reaching out to see how I'm doing, even though I'm the one who's doing it to myself. Um, so someone says what makes them feel better is talking to family and friends, reading a book, listening to music. Those are all some really positive self-care activities. Yes.
And what I want people to do is take this with you. And if you watch this later and you're not live with us, especially if you're watching a video right now and this is a recorded already for you, pause the tape, pause the video, and make a list. This will help you when you cannot think. Because what happens, Aisha, is that when we feel ourselves the worst and we are triggered, we really feel the worst, then we don't know what to do next. We don't know how to get out of that darkness. Then we have a list. We look at that list and we pick something from that list that we know already that has proven that works to make us feel better. And then you do one thing from that list. So pause if you're watching a recorded video. If you are here, take note and what makes it better. Start creating a list of what makes it better. When you have a good experience, find people that are supportive to you. When you talk to this person, you feel better. At least it makes you feel rooted, calmer, kind people, people that makes you feel better. That's why we have that list. So once you have that list, then you use that list. When you feel really tired, when you're really overwhelmed by grief, then you look at your list. Maybe take a picture, screenshot that list, have it with you. So when you feel really down, say, okay, I know what makes me feel better is to have some tea or take a shower and comb my hair. That I could do. So I will do that today. So look at your list. What can you do? Because sometimes when we are at our lowest moment and we are taken by grief, we can't even think what to do next. If we have a list, we could look at the list. You could share your list with friends and family and say, I want you to have this list. So when I don't know what to do, you suggest some of these things from the list or do it together with them.
That's perfect, Rafis. That's absolutely perfect. There's some more answers coming in now. So some people are like, you know what? That pause helped them to reflect. So someone says going for a walk or gardening or something to help. Someone says worse for them is focusing on the difficult last days or moments of my loved one's life. But what makes them feel saner or better is remembering their smile and the tenderness that was always present when they were alive.
Yes.
Oh, that's so sincere and that's so heartfelt. I love it. I
Yes.
think that's something that I'll definitely do is focus more on the positive about my loved ones rather than the negative parts. Um, Someone says for them, trying new recipes. Oh, definitely. I am a Pinterest fanatic. So and I have an air fryer now. Oh, definitely trying new recipes is a thing. So the person after that says baking cakes and then eating them. I like it. Journaling and writing poems that express my feelings. Taking a long shower to make me better. Someone says what makes them feel better is stretching, neighborhood walks, exercise, yoga, YouTube guided yoga, mindfully hydrating, drink that water, definitely. Breathing, communicating feelings to a loved one. And someone says for her self care is sewing. I have lots of masks now. I like that one. You can have a mask to match every outfit. Um, Someone says understand that you can take time for self reflection. Know that it's normal to feel all sorts of emotions and treat yourself. And then someone says allowing yourself to do time to do nothing productive. Oh, that's such a good one. I think especially during this time I see so many social media messages about, oh, how are you, look at this time, you should be starting business, you should be hustling, you should be an entrepreneur. And I'm like, I think people forget that we're all going through a pandemic, a global health pandemic. It is perfectly fine to not want to do anything at all because our brain is already in a state of uncertainty and anxiety and high rushing
Mm-hmm.
adrenaline all day long. It is perfectly fine to just sit and just be without worrying about what comes next because really and truly, we don't really know what comes next that easily. So I like that one.
Yeah, and the idea, Aisha, again, to remind everyone is take this little things because every little thing that as small as there are, they will make you to feel better, more whole, moving toward that. And then avoiding those things that makes you feel worse. Why would you continue to expose yourself to it? And sometimes we don't know, but now you're going to make a list and be aware of those. That every time you drive by certain places, you feel worse. Oh, after you talk to certain people that call you and you just hang up the phone, you're like, I just feel like, horrible. I am drained. I don't want to talk to her again. And then she calls the next day and you answer the phone. Don't do that. This grieving time, this time that we're living in, like Aisha said, is a time to survive this pandemic, to get through this pandemic, and to think that life will get better in many ways. We need to think of hope and the future. What can I do to conserve energy? I don't talk to people when they call me if they're going to be complaining all day, especially if they have no solution. So I don't engage in that. I don't talk about politics with people too much because we are so divided as a nation right now. And if talking about politics for you creates a lot of you, breaks your heart more because you feel so hopeless and you feel so attacked or you feel so alone because you believe in certain things that someone else don't believe, then avoid politics at all costs until at least we get through the election. Just go vote and forget about politics. Turn on your TV on November 4th, before go vote first. But do what you need to do. So don't watch the news all the time. Maybe read the news instead of watching the news.
Yeah.
Aisha, we are coming to an end. We have about 4 minutes or so. The last thing is going to be more visual. It's about hope. I want to people again, be kind to yourself. And the last thing I want to share is the power of hope. You know that people that have gone through horrible situation, research after research, when they think about people that have gone through horrible things in history, darkest periods in history, you know what got them through? The word is hope. Hope. Hope is what gets us through. We need to hold on to hope. When you don't know what else to do, hold on to hope. And what is hope? Hope is this idea that things will get better. And this is where mind, body, spirit comes in. Maybe your faith, maybe you have faith. You hold on to that hope that is based on your scripture, based on your tradition, and your belief that there's a higher power who's looking after us. And we're not alone. We're not left alone. This is not the end of the world as we know. And even if it's the end of the world, I am not alone. There's a creator who created this planet who's taking care of me. Maybe you don't have belief in a religious higher being, but you hope that you've gone through horrible things before and you get through this as well. Maybe you could learn from other people that have gone through horrible things and they all talk about the power of hope. Hope is that little light at the end of the tunnel, that little light that you see. That however tiny that light is, hold on to that light. Here's what the Dalai Lama says, no matter what sort of difficulty, doesn't matter what we're experiencing right now with COVID, you're infected, you're not infected, you lost one person, you lost more, and I'm so sorry if you lost more people, you lost your job, you lost your pet, you lost whatever you lost, whatever difficulty you lost during this time, however painful that is. If we lose our hope, that's a real disaster. We cannot lose hope, cannot lose hope. When we started this pandemic, I did another talk, another chat, and I was talking about how important it was to have that hope. And some of you connected to that. That's what get us through, to know that this too shall pass. And our elders and people that were elders and our ancestor and people that have gone through in the past, this is one wisdom that get passed on over and over, generation to generation. Doesn't matter how difficult, how dark the night is, this too shall pass. Pain, that was the whole point of permanence. Pain doesn't last forever, does not. When we're in it, things it lasts forever, but it does not. So if you're a Buddhist or you believe in this idea, this is Dalai Lama. If you're spiritual and you are more of biblical faith and you believe in the scripture, then the Bible says that we grieve with hope. People that have a biblical perspective, you believe that reading the scripture, listening to worship music, inspirational song, gospel music. Some people say, I want to listen to some gospel. You just put some gospel in the car and I'll feel better. I just turn off everything and listen to some gospel. So the Bible talks a lot about, you know, through the dark night, how the dark night of the soul is just the darkest night. We believe that we will dance again, that we will sing again, that light will come again, because we have hope. And for the people that believe in the biblical or the scripture, their faith, their religions, the hope is in their God. If you believe more the arts, or you believe, then this is for less mess. You know, Victor Hugo says, even in the darkest night, even in the darkest night will end and the sun will rise again. I live in Miami Beach, like I said, and every day I see the sun rising. Some days are really dark, and you know, when there's almost like a storm coming, it's very cloudy night. But if I look really closely, I see a little bit that the sun has come out. I might not see it there, but I see it at sunset when it's getting dark and I see the sunset setting. The sun was there. So the sun always rises. The daylight always comes after the darkest hour. And hope helps us to move ahead, the road ahead. What is the road ahead for you? What it looks like for you? Let's talk about 2021, 2022, 2023, 2024. How old are you now? Are you in your 20s? Are you in your 30s? Are you in your 40s? Think about how your life will be when you're in your next decade. For me, I am doing a dissertation, and I think of a life when I'm done with this dissertation. So I think about graduation coming. I think about that moment, and that gets me through the day when I don't want to get out of bed. So what is going to get you through? Do you have a trip coming up? Do you have a way that you're going to honor your loved one? Maybe you're going to do a foundation. You're going to create something for your loved one. Maybe you have a project that you want to do. So you need your energy. You need yourself. You need to care for yourself so you can start working on that. Take baby steps toward that, but look into hope. What are people hoping for? Maybe as a last thing, this is it. This is the last slide that I have here. I have two more, but maybe drop in the chat. What are something that you're hoping for? What are you looking for? What is, when you could see the little light at the end of the tunnel, what does 2021 looks like? Maybe what December looks like. And let's not focus right now about the pain of we're coming to Christmas and our loved one is not here and we're in a pandemic. Can we get past the pandemic, past the pain, past everything? And can we envision what a little, just for a minute. I know that some of you might want to do that. Just humor me for a minute. What would your life look like if you could imagine 2021, 2022, 2023, 2025, when you turn 5 years older, when your kid that just born is older, when your daughter that is right now in middle school gets to high school, when your daughter or your son that is in high school is going to graduate to college, what is your life going to look like? Some of you have wedding that you postpone. Maybe you're going to do your wedding next. Maybe you're going to do a celebrate. You had your wedding because you had no choice, but then you're planning to do a celebration with all your family and friends next year when the pandemic and it's safe for everyone. Maybe even you lost your loved one and you're going to have a celebration of life when we all could go back together. Maybe you didn't have a funeral and you're looking forward to have a nice dinner, a nice gathering, when we all could be together and your loved one life could be celebrated. Aisha, let's look at the chat. Let's have what people are commenting. What does the future looks like for you? If you could imagine in a hopeful future where things will get better, we'll get through this election, we get through this pandemic, how is that going to look like?
So I
This
like
is a miracle.
the miracle
I just
question.
I
So
just
I
want to
like
say,
how you
Aisha,
had those
if you,
quotes
yeah.
from both like the philosophical perspective as well as the biblical perspective and the artistic
All
perspective.
are welcome.
It reminded me of a quote from Albus Dumbledore from the Harry Potter series, for anybody who doesn't know who Dumbledore is, where he says in the very first book that happiness can be found in the darkest of times if only one remembers to turn on the light. And sometimes when it gets especially dark, the darkness is all we see, but we can find those moments too. So some of the comments that have been coming in, someone says, great presentation, thank you. Someone says, knowing that the sun will shine in the morning and God will give me strength to find another day. Someone says, I think it's important to discuss human rights and politics in a responsible manner, minding your well-being, and a lot of grief is associated with these topics in these times.
Yes.
We need to find self-care methods for these topics too. Avoiding the hard conversations can cause further guilt, grief, cognitive dissonance. Can it really be its own webinar? We do have some self-care webinars that are coming up. Check back on unitedwaybroward.org. Under events page, under trainings, you'll definitely see that we do try to address some of these topics. Next week, we have a topic, embracing uncertainty during the pandemic, and just how we're dealing with these issues as they're happening in real time. So next week we have one, and then there's some future self-care. So some things that people are looking forward to. Visiting my family out of the country. Me too.
Yes.
We're planning a whole birthday for my grandmother's 93rd birthday. So definitely hoping that travel is up and running by next year. Someone says I'll have a nephew due to be born in 2021. Congrats. Someone says they're going to go on a cruise, which I'm sure that at the beginning of this year, nobody thought they would be able to do again. So that's nice. Hugs from my pre-kindergarten students, traveling with families. I have family that passed in Maryland, and we will be trying, when we can, to have a memorial and celebration of life.
Very nice.
It's very hard not to do these things, do anything, and feel like we're not respecting them. I'm glad that you guys are making plans to celebrate that person's life. The future is what we make it. So I like to dream and make plans. Life is not over. We're learning how to live in the pandemic. And looking forward to family coming for Christmas. I'm definitely looking forward to the holidays. I don't know why I get so excited, if only to see the lights. And someone says, a quote, finish each day and be done with it. You have done what you could. Some blunders and absurdities have crept in. Forget them as soon as you can. Tomorrow is a new day. You will begin it serenely and with too high a spirit to be encumbered with your old nonsense. And that was by Emerson.
That's a beautiful, learn to live with the questions as well. Same author. So yes, I agree. And so the same thing, in wrapping up as we end, I want to say, yes, we're done with the summer. We're done with March. We're done with all the clips that we've watched since March began and the pandemic and what could have done, what we didn't do. We're done with spring and summer. We're in the fall now. So if you get yourself ready to continue to move forward, hope that the pandemic is going to pass, that things will get better. Okay, if you cannot get that, then you need help, find help. There's resources there. I want to share some of those resources with you. Here is some reference, and here's some of the books. Aisha is going to email the PowerPoint to people if you want it. So here's one of the books. This is the okay. It's okay that you're not okay. It's one of the best one that I found so far, in giving you practical tips. All about being kind to yourself. The worstness versus wellness came from there. Finding meaning, David Kessler. You could go online and you could actually do. He has a class online that you could do. It's an audio book nominated for a Grammy. So you can listen to this while you're driving or while you're home. Just put some headset, learn about this. Next one is the Unspeakable Loss. If you lost a partner or a child or someone, then this is really powerful, because it's a mother that has lost a child, but also could be a spouse, could be someone close to you. How do you go on? She does a little chapter there, Aisha, in that book, in 3 pages chapter, to suicide, to loss of child, to loss of this, questions. So it's all answering questions. The next one, my favorite one, because this is what I work with, is Suicide Loss. This is one of the best books for people that have lost someone to suicide or a family member after suicide loss, coping with your grief. Jack Jordan, Dr. Jordan, 40 years in the field, talks about what to expect. And I walk people through that many times using that book. Next one is grief.com. That is the website for David Kessler, the Finding Meaning author. He has many resources. He has movies you can watch that he recommends, other books. He has specific for each person. If you lost someone at work, if you lost someone in a tragedy, online group. I want to talk, Aisha, about Facebook. There's many online that you could do. You could do it in Facebook, or you could do it. There's many online community now more than ever. You could go online if you don't want to go to a place because you don't want to get infected with COVID, you don't want to be around people. You could go online, just like we're doing Zoom now. You could be in a room full of other people that are experiencing the same loss. I recommend you finding a group that is for people that have lost. So in other words, for mothers who have lost a son or a daughter, for a spouse that have lost a spouse. Find a specific group, because that will speak to your pain. And then you find friends there and people, and you learn, just like we learned today from each other, you learn from them. And you also share what you're learning. I learned a lot today from some of you. 211 is a place we could call, and United Way support this and helps with 211 to have 211 running. And 211 is a place we could call, and you could find a therapist. Find a grief therapy or coach, someone that is familiar with grief. Ask them, have you have any training on grief and bereavement and loss? Have you have any training on grief? If they don't have any training on grief, don't go to any therapist just to talk about grief. You have to be trained in grief, or they have to have experienced grief. Talk to your religious community. We talk about religious or spiritual community. Talk to a rabbi, to a pastor, to a reverend, to someone in your community. Talk to a friend who listens. If you have some friends that are listening and they call, and I have this friend that she always calls and she just listens. Should be someone that is walking with you and just listening, witnessing, just being there for you. So those are the resources, Aisha. We're going to open up for questions, but before we do that, we are good in time. I just want to take one moment, Aisha. I want to take a moment of silence right now. Whatever you're doing, just pause, take a moment. I want to acknowledge that you have lost your loved one, and that I'm so sorry for your loss. There's no words that I could say about your loss. When we began 2021, we never thought that you would be experiencing loss right now, or that we'll be dealing with a pandemic. None of us saw it coming. So be kind to yourself. Let's take a moment of silence. And you can take a deep breath and remember that. Remember, like someone said, their smile. Remember how good they were to your life. However brief you had them for. And we wish we had them for longer, but just be grateful in your heart. Remember that. And we could remember the compassion they share, what lessons they had for you. And when you feel really hard or you're feeling really grieving, focus on just remember the good things. Not the tragedy, not how they died in a tragic way, not the last few minutes in the ICU or the ER, not the horrible news. Remember their lives, those moments, the vacation you shared together, your first kiss with them if it was your partner, the first time you held them on your arm if it's your child, your siblings, the things that you shared together when you were growing up. Remember those things. If it was a mentor or someone in your community that did great things in your community, remember them that way. What you learn from them about leadership, what you learn about giving to others. Yes, we could remember them and honor them. So Aisha, that is the end of the presentation. I want to encourage to hold on to hope. This is for people that are more visual. Hope. In the middle dark of the night, find hope. Hold on to hope. Okay? This is on the beach. Sometimes you could get up at sunset and just have a cup of coffee or tea and remember your loved ones. And you could talk to them. You could talk to them and, say, I want to talk about what's been happening, or I miss you, or I remember this. Hold on to hope. Remember your loved one. Be kind to yourself. That's what I could tell you as a grief therapist, as someone who works with trauma, and someone who myself has lost someone in a tragic way. Thank you so much. Questions?
Oh, Rafis, you are getting like rave comments. Someone says it was a really good topic and presentation. It feels like we're chatting in a comfortable coffee house. Thank you guys so much for participating today. I put in the chat box, but let me just remind you all that if anybody is a licensed clinician and you need a CEU, please send me an email to my email at amcdonald, and I'm writing it again in the chat box, amcdonald at unitedwaybroward.edu.org, sorry, not edu. Also, you will be able to receive certificates for it. If you need a certificate, please send me an email and I will email that certificate to you so that you can have it. I thank you all so much for coming, for sharing,
What,
making the
what's it? Have any questions, Aisha? Or?
no, no questions. Just people just saying that this was a lot of information and that they loved it and that they're really grateful that you were able to share the information. And again, if you need CEUs or certificates, please email me. And if anybody wants the presentation, send me an email as well and I will get that to you. And thank you so much, Rafis. And we are
Thank you.
right on time, actually. Yeah, I just checked. Um, and then just please follow up with us. We have some more upcoming trainings. Next week we'll have the embracing uncertainty in the time of pandemic, which is we went over just a little bit. I I miss the C in my own name. It's A McDonald. Thank you so much for letting me know. Someone just mentioned that I did not spell my own name correctly. So you should have my email in the messages that were sent out to you before. But just so you know, it's A McDonald, and we're just so
And
grateful.
I and Aisha, I want to say a closing as well. They could reach out to me if they have any questions about also the power, this presentation specific, or they have anyone that have lost to suicide. We have a coalition at United Way, or we have Lois, and we have many resources. And so definitely if you have someone that have died to suicide or anything in that manner, you want to reach out to me, that's my email and that's my phone number.
Thank you guys so much. And we
Thank
appreciate
you.
everybody being here today. This will be posted as a recording on our United Way of Broward County's YouTube page. It will also be available under our prevention resources on our commission website under unitedwaybroward.org. So you can always feel free to share the recording and share the information with other people who you think may benefit from this. Thank you all for attending today, and we look forward to seeing you at the other community trainings. And thank you, Rafis. This was good information. Thank you
Thank,
for sharing your expertise, but also thank you for sharing your personal stories. We're really grateful for it.
thank you for, thank you everyone, and thank you for inviting me. Again, don't forget to be kind to yourself, and we will get through this pandemic, and we'll get through this together. Thank you. Have a good day.